In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Please be seated. This morning we celebrate the Feast of the Transfiguration. It is a story that is found in the gospel accounts of Jesus where probably it is the only time that a miracle actually happens to Jesus. Jesus is usually the one performing the miracles. This time around, Jesus himself has a miracle performed on him by God. We read that Jesus took three of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, and took them up onto the top of a mountain. And we understand that mountain, in most cases, to be Mount Tabor. We're not 100% sure, but we believe it to be Mount Tabor in Israel. And if you go up onto the top of Mount Tabor, you have a beautiful view of everything that surrounds in the valley below the mountain. Often we are called up onto a mountain area because we can get away and we get a better view of what is actually going on around us. But in our gospel account, we hear the story of the Transfiguration where Jesus' face seems to change somehow. And his disciples can recognize this, and they see that something is different. They can read in Jesus' face that something is different. Maybe they see him differently. You know, when I was in college, my freshman year in college, I participated in what I'm sure must be some sort of rite of passage, we'll say, in that I participated in a poker game. Now, they say that if you are playing poker and you don't know who the sucker is, it's you. So I'm sitting and playing poker, which I had done before when I was in high school, but I'm sitting around this table, and three of the four other guys that were there playing were seniors, and they just had to look at me and know that, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. After three hands of losing at poker, one of the seniors had the grace to tell me, Mark, I'm going to give you a piece of advice, and if you will take my advice, I promise you it will save you a fortune. Don't ever play poker again. He said, because I can look right into your face and I can practically read the cards. You give yourself away. Well, I can look at you and tell exactly whether you're trying to bluff or what you have in your hand. So do yourself a favor and step away from the game, which I did. And I've tried to remember that piece of advice. In our gospel reading, we get this wonderful story that mirrors the story that we get in the Old Testament also, where Moses goes up onto the mountain and his face changes in the presence of God. And in our gospel reading, Jesus goes up to the mountain and God speaks to all that are gathered there, and Moses and Elijah show up, and Peter and James and John are gathered, and Peter says, this is a really good place for us to be. Let's just stay here. I think he uses the words, let's build a booth. They just simply, let's stay here. And Jesus tells him, that's not what we're here to do. At that time, God is speaking to Jesus, and he tells all of those that are gathered around him, this is my son. Listen to what he has to say. Listen to him. All of the three disciples that were gathered with Jesus can look into Jesus' face and see that something has happened. Jesus, the human being they see and have known for the past several years, has changed somehow, and they see not only the human Jesus, but they catch a glimpse of the divine Jesus as well. God is giving them a little bit of a peek into what the kingdom of heaven is like. And they have this very thin space, as Mother Cynthia used to say, or I call it a liminal space, that little piece of space between here and there, from one side to the other. And it's somehow we get a little glimpse of what is on that other side. And God is giving us that wonderful view. You know, all of us come here and we worship on Sundays and Saturdays and during the week. And I've got to tell you, and I have said this to our vestry several times, I have been given this wonderful gift in that when I come to worship with all of you, I have the advantage of seeing all of your faces. I get to see the expressions in your faces. I get to see the expressions when I preach of some of you smiling and some of you nodding, some of you going, no, I'm not so sure about that. And that's okay, that's all right. But I get the opportunity to see you face to face, which I think is a little bit of an advantage in that all of you sitting here in the pews pretty much have a view of me, and those of us that are sitting up here, and certainly this wonderful view of the altar, and then the view of the back of the heads of all of those worshipers that are in this parish worshiping with you. And I think there's a little bit of a difference. I wish that all of you, I would invite any one of you at any time who wishes to come up and worship in the front of the church with us to do so anytime you want to. Any Sunday morning, if you say, I'd like to go up front and sit up front with you so I can see what it looks like from up here, so I can see the faces of everybody that is worshiping. Because when you can see the face of all of the people that are here, you get this opportunity to read just a little bit more into what is going on in their lives. I know most of you pretty well. We've been here together, worshiping together for a long time. And there are things that I know about you that we don't share with one another, but I know that you are going through certain things in your lives, whether they are things that you rejoice, they are changes, or they are hardships, or things that are heartbreaking, such as illnesses and deaths. But we also get the chance to look at one another and be able to share with one another actually what is inside, catching this glimpse of what is inside the people that are in here worshiping. I've got to tell you, if all of us here could look into the eyes or to feel the people that are sitting next to them and get a greater awareness of what those individuals are going through, you would all see each other differently. You would all understand one another differently. It is really hard to, when you worship with someone and you know what that individual is going through, it is really difficult to want to reach out and love that person. It is hard to disagree. It is hard to be mad at someone when you know what is going on in their lives. And if we all knew what was going on in one another's lives, we would all treat each other a little differently. You know, the same thing can be said for all of us as we go out into the world. My challenge is for all of us to try to do that, to look into the eyes of one another, to get to know one another better, to be in this safe space and to get to know one another so that we can treat one another not just as we would treat them, but as God would treat them. To look at one another not through just our eyes, but through the eyes of God. And if we can do that here in this parish, our next step is to go out into the world and to see the people that are out in the world differently, to see the people out in the world as God sees them, and to be able to treat them differently, to be able to understand their circumstances better, to be able to better understand what they're going through and how they are living out their lives, and to be more charitable, to be more forgiving, to be more open and loving towards people that we completely either disagree with or we just have not had the opportunity to get to know. You know, a couple of things have happened in this parish over the past few years that have given us the opportunity to see people and circumstances in a very different way. One of them is through the work that we have all done together at St. Lawrence Chapel, and being able to spend time with and worship and to share a meal with those who are hungry and homeless over at St. Lawrence Chapel. And those of us who have been over there will easily come back and tell you that they understand the problem just a little bit better and that they see the people there differently. It is hard to be an individual who just puts down someone who is homeless if you are working and feeding someone who is homeless. It is hard to get angry at someone and say you're just lazy and you need to go get a job when you can reach out and you can touch them and you can look into their eyes and you can share a meal with them. It changes everything. The other opportunity that we have had recently is this issue of immigration. Now, many of us have very different views on how the immigration should run. I can tell you that I don't know that there is a right way, except that we need to look at one another and treat one another as if God were present with us. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that what we are doing is not only not working, it is not right. If we got a chance to meet and to work with people who have come to this country and are making a living in this country and are living amongst us for years, for decades at times, simply wanting to live their lives out in a place where they do not have to live in fear, then we need to reach out and we need to get to understand people like that better. You know that 5 or 6 months ago, I stood in this pulpit and I preached a sermon about an individual who was a worshiper at Holy Redeemer Episcopal Church up in Palm Beach County, and how I got a call from the rector's wife and saying that Father Jean, the rector there, was looking for one of his parishioners because the parishioner had gone down to Miami and had had an appointment with INS, and simply, as the story, as I told you, said, simply disappeared. It was several days before we could locate this person. And because we've had this opportunity to work with this, and we have worked hard in this parish to try to help this individual, we have gotten a better understanding of what it might be like to try to help and empathize with those who are going through the process and are simply want to live here amongst us as loving, caring, contributing, law-abiding citizens in this country. The story that I told all of you, the story that I shared with all of you, was about an individual by the name of Julio. We have worked very hard to try to help Julio. You know that your senior warden, Janice Villiers, has worked very, very hard trying to reach out to him and to meet with him, to go to court with Julio and try to afford Julio the opportunity to continue to live and work amongst us as he has for almost 25 years. I want to tell you something. I want to put a face to a problem. I want to put a face to an opportunity. I want you to meet Julio. Please be seated. Let me get the mic. We have with us this morning Janice Villiers, who is our senior warden. We have Father Jean Beniste, who is the rector of Holy Redeemer. Is that on? We have Julio's brother Santos, who is with us. And we have Julio, the person that you have prayed for and helped to be able to get him out of federal detention. And he is out on bond in federal detention. Hopefully we will be able to have his case dismissed and he will be able to continue in the process of seeking full citizenship here in the United States. Julio wants to take a couple of seconds and to thank you and to tell you just a little bit about his story, and if you would interpret that for him and let him.
Yo tengo el micrófono, entonces yo voy
Ok.
introduciéndolo. Pero
Ok.
use usted para que oigan
Ok.
su voz.
Buenos días a la comunidad de permitirme estar aquí en esta iglesia.
First of all, good morning, but he says thank you very much for giving him the privilege of being here in this church.
Ok, mi nombre es Julio Barrientos Pérez. Yo soy la persona que estaba en CRON de inmigración.
His name is Julio Barrientos
Barrientos Pérez.
Pérez. And he is the person who was detained in Chrome.
Por primera vez le doy gracias a Dios que estoy afuera y le doy gracias al Padre Jan, al Padre Mark, al obispo, le doy gracias a la abogada Janice, que hizo un excelente trabajo. Gracias a Dios estoy afuera y me han ayudado mucho.
He says, first of all, he wants to thank God for finally being free, but he also wants to thank Father Jean, Father Mark, Janice, the bishop, and everyone who has prayed for him and has helped him to finally be free.
Ok, a la comunidad de aquí, de todos, de esta iglesia, estuvieron en oración por mí y de otras iglesias afuera estaban en oración. El caso, bien, gracias a Dios.
Thanks be to God that his case has been able to proceed well, and hopefully there is a wonderful result at the end.
Gracias por todo.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias, thank you.
Gracias, Julio.
Thank you. This is what happens when we pray for a positive outcome. We still have a bit of a fight ahead of us. We still have quite a challenge. But being able to get Julio out of federal detention and to be able to go back and work and live with his friends and his family like he has for the past 25 years, at least we have accomplished that. And we have accomplished that through your prayers, through your support, and we are grateful for that. I asked Julio to come here today after just being released. Most of you saw the videos just a couple of weeks ago, being able to be released from federal detention so that we could simply put a face to a challenge. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that what we are doing is not exactly the course I think we should be taking. If we looked in the face of every individual that was here, who loves us, loves our country, wants to work with us, wants to continue to worship, as Julio has been doing at Holy Redeemer for all these years, we need to continue to reach out to them and to help them. They are people that we can now put a face to. We might be able to see not only Julio, but the face of immigration, not just through our eyes, but through the eyes of God. When Father Jean came this morning, he brought to us an envelope, a gathering that they had taken up, a collection at Holy Redeemer Episcopal Church. Holy Redeemer is not a very large church. It is a very humble parish. But they have raised $3,000 in order to be able to help Julio in his process towards citizenship. I am going to issue a challenge to this parish this morning to help us in any way that you can. Help us to at least try to match this amount. When the offering plate is passed around later this morning, please look into your hearts and see what you might be able to do to help us, to help us here at St. Mary Magdalene reach out and to help those individuals like Julio at Holy Redeemer who need our help, because we are all children of God. Let us look at each other through the eyes of God, not just through our eyes. Amen. Senior Warden, there you go. I'd like for us to continue with the prayers of the people.